customer obsessed, extraordinary, these words, experiences. Not only is it hard to talk about what do you mean by experience, what do you mean by extraordinary?
Yeah.
And then customer and obsessed, and who is your target, and who is, and just being obsessed isn't really good business. So experiences, loaded word, maybe not all that helpful. Delight, oh, we want to delight our customers. Do you? Always? I mean, not a bad thing, but it's very hard to operationalize delight. I would see kind of a mission and core value of delighting, being upset, customer obsessed in order to delight customers. To actually, that would encourage a 10-minute delivery window.
Right.
But in the long run, it's not actually. So being really clear and stripping away this language that sounds good, but is not helpful and is not. Again, I'll go back to
Not
operationalizing.
needed,
What do you mean, and what are the metrics, and what are the behaviors, and it's not those two things.
Right. Who owns CX? Because typically they would go for the local maxima. Somebody looking at marketing would focus on getting more signups. So they'll focus on that. But are they getting the right customers? Maybe they don't care because their KPI is getting more signups. From a product team standpoint, would be new features. How many features have they rolled out? Were the features great? Not great? Quality of the features, did they solve the problem? If that's not the KPI, again, overall as a company, they're going to falter. And likewise. So who owns CX then?
So I don't know if this is our last chapter, but this is such a brilliant topic because I think everyone owns CX. Having had roles where I was a lead for CX in an org, but everybody owns it. It goes back to marketing is part of the experience. But I think marketing's real role is growth. You need to think about brand and product and growth and how to actually, it's not just sales, but just growth. Everyone owns customer-focused thinking. If you're not thinking that, you probably shouldn't be in that organization. So, but I'll go back to when it comes to the experience part of CX, everyone has such a big part, it's hard to put it. It's not just part of marketing, it's oftentimes related to marketing, but it's also part of product, it's also part of the tech. It delivers on the experience.
It's like a movie, right? It's like everything has to fall in place for
Absolutely.
a great movie. Yeah.
Which is why I think maybe the time has come to talk about it, but not actually own it in some form. Now, I do think a lot of customer experience CX related functions now fit within product teams. So I think as I look at where things, and I think care is important, and brand and design, but if I look at more maybe recently reorganized companies and modern, the product teams are like little mini businesses. And the product lead needs to be relentlessly customer focused on how is she or he meeting the needs of a customer. What is the job to be done? Product teams oftentimes now are looking at analytics. They're oftentimes looking at hopefully design. Design teams are fully incorporated. They should also be accountable for care. I do think customer care should be attributed back to the product teams, et cetera. Like how many calls are coming? Because that'll make them fix those problems and things. So I think CX ownership needs to be philosophical and strategic, but maybe not as much organizational.
Okay.
The growth-oriented, the data, all those other things are more actionable. They can be owned in service of customer growth and customer experience. If you always are focusing on who you are designing for, and I use that word broadly, who your business is targeted, you'll always see what the problem is. If you always stay in the problem space, there's that Jeff Bezos quote from his 2016 letter to shareholders, customers are always wonderfully and beautifully dissatisfied. You think about that and stay in that and think that it is wonderful and beautiful. They will always want something better. He also said this. They will always want something better even if they don't ask for it. So if that's where you're going, but that you will always understand what can be next if your business and your teams are so relentlessly focused on who those people are, who aren't your customers, what could they want, how can you not do what they're asking for, but innovate on their behalf. And that's our job. That's our job as business people, as product designers, et cetera, and then as experienced designers to think through what can we do that will meet the need or meet the desire, even if they're not necessarily asking for it.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of CX with Chopra. Today we are in New York, Times Square, and today the guest, I'm privileged to introduce a guest, Mr. Donald Chesnut. He is a thought leader. He's played the role of Chief Experience Officer at Publicis Sapient, MasterCard, General Motors, and I mean, if you Google it, you'll find him on the top 30 CXOs in the world. So honestly, it's a goosebump moment for me, and privileged to have you on this episode. So thank you so much for joining.
Thanks, Chopra. Really good seeing you, and thanks for the invitation. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Looking forward to it, and I'll jump right in on the whole the topic of CX. That interesting perspective which I've learned is that as all the brands are trying to curate a great impeccable CX for the end customer, we know it's important to understand the customer, what they need, deliver what they need, bridge that gap. But end of the day, CX is all about art of managing perceptions. I mean, we may think of that the problem is here and you want to solve here, but it could be something else. And in one of my episodes, one of my guests talked about the elevator example. I think more than 100 years ago, when elevators were introduced in the skyscrapers in New York, people started complaining that it's too slow. I mean, either the whole skyscraper concept would have gone away because people were frustrated, they can't take the stairs, and elevator used to take a lot of time. I mean, common sense would be probably to speed up the elevator, which again was not the solution because back then those elevators had those grills. I mean, what's the right speed? How safe it is, not safe. And you can't have more elevators, it'll take real estate. What they figured was that they simply installed a mirror in the elevator. It's like when you look at yourself or you look at something interesting, you lose track of time. And that was the solution. And that's why till date we have mirrors in the elevator, because while looking at myself in the elevator, I lose track of time. So again, I mean, interesting that how it's all art of perception. We may think this is the problem, but the solution will lie somewhere else. What are your thoughts on that?
It's such a brilliant example. I'm chuckling. It goes to, design thinking, experience-related thinking, constantly staying in the problem space. It's not about the solution. It's about the problem. If you're focused on what are customers' problems, what are the issues that they have, you can find so many different ways to be creative about solving that. That's true customer centricity. The problem is it felt too long. It is too long or it felt too long, but what they came up with was a little bit of vanity, right, self-love, or insecurity. Put it in a mirror and actually have people look at and suddenly but the problem is the wait time, and what do you do? And if you just focus on the wait time, you can figure out, get rid of skyscrapers, make them faster, make them dangerously, whatever it is, or just put a mirror in. Or in today's world, love it or hate it, but those video screens that show you the sound bites, there's but there's a lot of different ways they stayed in the problem to look at what you. I love that. Yeah. And that is, again,
I think
if you're
Disney
staying
or all these theme parks also do.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
I was on a jury for mobile awards, and there was gaming. So they gamified what you do while you're waiting online for the attraction. The game that was only available there, and then suddenly people weren't focused on this is a 25-minute wait. They were actually doing things and playing against you. So it's just like you look at the problem space, you stay in the problem, and then you figure out that there's lots of different ways to solve that over time. There's not one. There's not just get rid of the wait time. Sometimes you can't, but there's other ways to actually take that away.
But coming to the whole, I'm going to come to that point, because coming to the whole evolution of CX. I mean, initially we started with product focus. You make the right product, you make a stereo cassette player. Sony made it, people figure out a way to use it. The metric people use was how many features does it have. Then Amazon changed it to more on customer focus. How do we focus on NPS, customer satisfaction, all of that. And then it moved to customer experience. And now when we're talking about in the whole context, add to it the whole digitization which has happened. whole new wave of new ways of doing things. I think people are still trying to cope up with digitization, post the pandemic. On top of that, hit it with AI. Everybody knows AI is coming. It's like you look back, it's there, but you keep turning. Where is it? But it's going to come. It's right behind you. So, coming to the initial point, that how do we know what the problem is going to be?
All right. So I think how do we know what the problem is going to be? I'll go back to what we just said. If you always are focusing on who you are designing for, and I use that word broadly, who your business is targeted, you'll always see what the problem is. If you always stay in the problem space, there's that Jeff Bezos quote from his 2016 letter to shareholders: customers are always wonderfully and beautifully dissatisfied. You think about that and stay in that and think that it is wonderful and beautiful. They will always want something better. He also said this: they will always want something better, even if they don't ask for it. So if that's where you're going, but you will always understand what can be next if your business and your teams are so relentlessly focused on who those people are, who aren't your customers, what could they want, how can you not do what they're asking for, but innovate on their behalf. And that's our job. That's our job as business people, as product designers, et cetera, and then as experience designers to think through what can we do that will meet the need or meet the desire, even if they're not necessarily asking for it. But what I do love, and I think even as you kind of put together the history, I do think technology brought us experience-based thinking. Like before we had internet, start there, you had, I don't know, a vacuum. Right. So function, et cetera. And you had a sales channel, et cetera. It was all very, I don't want to say staid, but you had multiple Once you had things presented in a technological form, once you had a brand that came to life on a website, eventually on the vacuum itself, then we started really talking about the experience. Does it work? Is it easy? How does it come to life? That is in the 90s kind of the genesis of, and we talked about brand experience then and how your website differentiated. But I think with also that level of technology, you had competitors a click away.
Right.
So you could buy a vacuum from here or from there, so to speak. And it wasn't that easy, I think, before then. So I think we talked about how products and how brands came to life in the experience. There's content and technology and how easy it is to use, et cetera. It's just an interesting context of technology and experience are so interrelated, and I don't believe businesses talked about the customer brand or even user experience before we had tech.
Right.
So if you accept that, then you look at web tech, mobile tech, in-venue, wearable tech, and now you have AI. And how will that change experiences today? And it is, I'm sure we're going to continue to get into it, but there's no way you can't think about the seismic change that AI is bringing to brands and to products and to experiences today, because it'll be the single biggest change we have moving forward. But I'll pause there.
One more point so there are two things. One is that there's a growth curve or learning curve, let's say. One is with tech, it's growing at a fast pace. We had metaverse, then we're talking about AI, and we're going to talk about something else, I'm sure, by the end of the year. There's a growth evolution curve with businesses have to adopt to those tech. I mean, I'm sure a lot of companies would have invested in metaverse, last year. They're still struggling with coming out of it, and now it's AI. I mean, they're still thinking, should we do a lot of POCs, point of views, build point of views before investing big time, like probably they did in metaverse. So they also have their curve. Then there's the curve which customers have, trying to learn new things, new tools, new techs, new way of buying, purchasing, doing things, break it down by demographics. All of this somewhere has to converge in a way. But on the other side, we're also talking about, like you said, what Jeff Bezos said, Also what I think Steve Jobs spoke probably in 1984 in his keynote. I mean, I looked at your LinkedIn post as well, and he said, wasn't it the way, like this always? So it's like you have to be always forward thinking. He brought in different kind of thinking in terms of putting in design, literature, everything into tech. Nobody had thought of it. So one is that visionary, and other on the side being practical, where we see where do the three curves would merge. What would we be that point where we go and say, okay, let's invest in this and do this? I mean, I don't know. There's no answer. I mean, it's very interesting. I keep thinking about it as well. So, what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, so we could do the whole chat around this topic. There is how these new technologies, specifically AI, can be used within business, and how it also can be used, how it touches actually customers. But I look at the rate of adoption for different services, different apps even. You look at how long it took Instagram, and I should know this because I read it yesterday. It wasn't the data point statistic, it was the general point, so forgive me. But I don't know how long it took Instagram to get to 1 million, whatever, 1.6 million, or
I think 10 months or something like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you look at ChatGPT,
Wow. Yeah.
tiny. People are already adapting things more quickly than they ever, versus Metaverse and Roblox, and there's a niche audience. So I think, I do think being really forward thinking is important, but at the same time being really reductive around people. People don't love to change.
Right.
Certain things, if you're going to ask people to don a wearable, it better be really good, whether it's on their wrist or on their face, really good. Google Glasses wasn't really good. It was gimmicky and wasn't real. So just understanding that people don't like to change, but at the same time, the quality of what consumers are getting in search and generative from all of the new platforms that are there is pretty good, which is why the rate of adoption is a lot smaller, and now making sure that they stay, et cetera. But that adoption curve is so to get really to your question, I do think businesses, it is the imperative to look at how AI is changing almost everything, how it's changing customer research, how it's changing design. And it's not to say all the old methods are bad, but it is a radical change.
Right.
How it's changing production, how it's changing testing, how it's like the ability to understand, harness, try, fail, because we will. Sometimes we use a product, it's not great, and sometimes it takes a while to go back internally. But the more we can have that test and learn and accept sometimes the failures still move us forward internally, and then also understand that I think customers consumers are more likely to try new things, more probably than they ever have been, particularly if there's a low barrier of entry, a Claude, et cetera. It's just just getting them to try it once and seeing what the results are. Right. Getting them to buy a wearable and put it on their face, whether it's Ray-Ban glasses or something else, is a lot more of a commitment. And there's different customers that will do that. But we could impact that a lot more, I think.
Yeah, so it's more to do with usability. I mean, it is to do with usability also than what features, functionality it brings then, right?
I will say it's the reverse. The usefulness is always first. So if there's use there, people will sometimes overlook usability, et cetera, and the desirability is there. But you always need to make it, the leaders will have all three of those things.
No, but then if you have to pick an order, if it's not very useful or easily usable, then I'm making the end user make an effort to learn something new, how to do it. For instance, if you go to a KFC or a McDonald's, they have those kiosks. Now the kiosk experience has to map to exactly how the app experience is, so that when I go there, for me, it's the same. I don't have to learn a new experience. I already use the app. I'll quickly use the kiosk because, it's the same interface, similar kind of interface. So for me, the adoptability of that kiosk will increase if the usability is high. I mean, that's one perspective, could be related to QSRs, but maybe something else.
So, I would go with that. I agree to a point, but I also think if people want chicken or whatever it is, and they have never used the app, there's only a portion of folks that are using both, and stumble in 1 a.m., they'll get through a usability. That's the usefulness that's there. I mean, I do agree, you need to make it. If we want to be really successful in the long run, all three of those things is really important. But not every customer. I think sometimes we think consistency is paramount. Sometimes it is. Not every customer is using the mobile app, et cetera. I do think, maybe it's worth noting, I've come to believe that there are different types of experiences, user or customer, doesn't matter. And I relate this back to, there's a great book, Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow. If you've ever read it, I'm sure many people have. He talks about thinking. And there are two types of thinking, decision-making experiences. They're the ones that we're making all the time, and I'm talking to you, and I'm also feeling an itch, and I'm deciding to scratch the itch, or I'm chatting with you on the, and I'm seeing a green light, and yes, I can do both, and I'm not even thinking about the green light. My subconscious is deciding it's okay now. There's the considered. Okay, do I want chicken? Do I want fried, or do I want, a grilled sandwich and whatever else? That's a very front of mind type of decision. So I've come, a lot of my work and experiences over the years has taught me they're not all similar. They're not all the same. A digital experience is not the same as in-store. So in this case, there are the quick experiences that you don't even think about. And they're the considered experiences. And the quick experiences, even within a KFC menu, is kind of sometimes the function and checkout, because you're already thinking about something else and seeing boop, 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 and then I'm going to pay via my wallet.
Yeah.
And the considered is the choice that you're making. And so I think just understanding that. My work in payments, when I was at MasterCard and thinking through, a lot of payments are type 1, really quick experiences. If it's not a lot of money, I'm hitting the metro, I'm just tapping my phone, or I'm at the grocery store, I'm not always checking every price. If it's just a small selection of things. Those are fast experiences, and usability is paramount, except for when something doesn't work, and then it's a front of mind experiences. So if I'm shopping for shoes, all of that is much more. And I think sometimes trying to put measurements and standards, and thought a lot around a return on experience framework to try to measure experiences, and understanding that those slow, considered type 2, using the thinking, and in a store is just very different. Higher touch, higher thinking, maybe the associate's important, versus a quick aspect, and brands operating on that, many of them all the time. So
then how do you manage, especially in now everybody's thinking about how do we manage the whole digital versus physical transition? Because the customer expectation obviously has risen to a point that they want the same seamless experience. So coming to your point, how do we manage from a physical store, which is high touch, high on experience, versus digital, where it's, you want to probably focus on convenience as well, getting them to what they want very quickly. So how do and end of the day, they want to have the same, seamless experience. So does it vary by industry to industry, or?
It does, and it varies by purchase type.
Okay.
And it varies by where they are. It varies by many things. And I think, I feel like I've learned, because I spent a long time trying to think through what are the standards, how do we look at the value, as a lot of in-person is moving to digital. And I've also come to believe, like I have a little positioning that is, the best brands think about each of those types of experiences in different ways.
Okay.
And one is digitally human, and one is deliberately human. And I've worked in companies where many of the thinking is, we'll just push it to the associate, push it to the contact center. If there's an issue, if there's a special need, et cetera, that's just an error in thinking and product design. You need things to work in a digitally human kind of way, where they can do almost anything. And you need to use the humans and the environment and everything else very deliberately. And both of those things, I think, in the mixture of each, so finding when you need help, there's an associate there. If you need help, there's an associate there. But trying to think things through in what I call like a digitally human, that it just works according to, which is a lot of what we're talking about so far today, is how do you design for the desirability, and how do you design to make sure that it works? And those things are so important, that the usefulness and everything is there. But the mix of those two is nirvana. And again, in commerce, and in retail, there's e-commerce, so the whole aspect of digitally human is really important. And then being able, for some things, there's many retail businesses that don't ever really need the human. But so just trying to think through that balance. And the work that I was doing in the last few years around experience more broadly, what happens in a car dealership, very different than what can happen on your mobile app or on the website when you're shopping for a vehicle. And making sure that both work well, the deliberate human, the digitally human, et cetera, and the same thing with contact center. So trying to understand, but there's a different set of metrics, and there's a different set of kind of understanding how well is the experience designed to meet those things? That makes sense, but yeah.
No, interesting. But then where does the whole AI chatbot come into the play? Because the reason I'm saying is because that seems to be was the first AI use case in a way where everybody's implemented it. And the whole AI chatbot paradox is every brand wants a chatbot, but nobody wants to interact with the chatbot. So where does that fit into, human, digital, and AI? That how does that fit?
So I'll start first of all that I think the opportunity for AI is so much bigger than chat.
Sure.
And I don't know, I can kind of try to coin a phrase, but I don't know if we've ever met a chatbot we've loved, any of us.
Yeah.
Loved. And we've met many of them, we've encountered many of them that are a useless waste of time. They don't further the brand, they're not digitally human, et cetera.
Correct.
But the opportunity is there. So how to figure out, and I also firmly believe that people, there's a segment of people, but growing, are so digitally innate now. We do everything. Our phones are here and there, et cetera, that I think customers on the whole, they would largely like to believe they don't have to or want to always talk to someone. So how do you just automate the things that I can chat? I mean, I love Apple and their customer care because it starts, I can just chat. Bot, step up, person, and whatever. And I can be doing different things. I can be cooking chicken and having a chat and whatever else.
Right.
So that's a great mix of, and their chat is really one of the exemplary ones. But AI is so much bigger than that. So I think, putting chat in its box and continuing to amplify like queries. And, I use a lot of the AI tools right now for some of the work that I'm doing. It's not chat, but there's an interaction, there's a conversation. True. It's not chatbot. Chatbot is just the smallest part of what AI is bringing us. The intelligence that is coming back and forth and the ability to build on a conversation, I'm getting very visual today, but that level of one exchange and then it builds, and that is brilliant. Because brands begin to think through how can they create that level of conversation with their customers, not exclusively digitally, but that's an opportunity that is much bigger than I've got a problem, I need to raise it, I first get the bot until I can get an associate. That I think is the use case that we all see. But how great would it be if I were shopping for something complicated and complex, a house, maybe a car, second largest purchase. What if I had access to intelligence, not chat, but intelligence at every step along the way that I could say which brand, which model, and really be personalized. And I'm a grandparent buying a vehicle for a high school graduate, real use case. What is the best vehicle? And sometimes you might want to ask someone that. Sometimes you might want an agent working on my behalf that helps me all the way through. Or maybe it's for me and I'm thinking about a first EV, and how does that exchange happen that builds, that also becomes the brand's counterpart once I have the vehicle, in the vehicle, et cetera. So these agents that are part of banking, we see it a lot. They're only so good, but they will get better, and they will get better very quickly. So, I broaden the take as I think about what AI can bring besides the small offerings that we have today that could be so much bigger, that are much more intelligent based. And I see it in the analysis work and being able to look at large sets of data, look at voice of the customer in mind, what do we think is going on, and what is coming back is so shockingly different than what we used to be able to do. And if you could start to bring that to customers in a smart way, and I think we will, but it will take some time.
But you're saying that, would this mean that these are the new opportunities which will come, like new business models? Because for a brand to build that kind of an intelligence and help a customer, at some point there'll be some conflict of interest as well. I may not have that car, probably what the customer is looking for, but some other competitor may have it. So it could be the new set of opportunities which might come up for new companies to come and build those intelligence or agents which will then tell you and maybe connect you to a dealership and then get you the car as well. Maybe.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a conscious business choice and conscious. You and I were talking a little bit this morning just over trust.
Right.
How do you build trust? And kind of you can be so trustworthy that you're putting business to somebody else. You know, that enables trust, but it's maybe not good business. But how do you do it in such a smart way that you're actually understanding what the customer needs and serving them in the best way? Absolutely.
And then coming to what's next in CX, because we've talked about all this, we're talking about tech, you know, what's coming, new opportunities, but then from a customer experience standpoint, so what's your thought on, you know, what's next or what to expect?
So I have what I feel are some, I think they're bold thoughts around what's next for customer experience. And so I've spent 20 plus years in the experience world. I think we started when tech first came out. We talked about brand experience and then usability and user experience and how important that is, desirability and feasibility and usability. And then customer. And then as we had multiple channels, we started to really think about the customer's experience across the journey of banking, of buying a home. All that's valid. I've spent all of those years really thinking about experience. Some of the things that we're talking today is how do things feel? What is the reaction, et cetera? How do we understand? And I think businesses today, I haven't met a business that doesn't have probably a customer experience somewhere in their mission or purpose and on their whiteboards or core values. But the challenges I've seen really maybe in the last 5-7 years within businesses is it is very hard to operationalize, I'll use the word experience-based thinking. What is an experience? What do we mean?
Yeah.
And to sitting in a room with 10 people, there's probably 10 different ideas about what experience means. Sometimes it means experiential. Sometimes, you know, I was on a panel and we first had to define customer experience. And I thought, this is the problem. 20 years later, with a bunch of smart people, we're on this panel, it was an invited audience of some senior folks. And we wanted to lay down, how do we think and how do we define what we're talking about? And on that panel, there was someone that did experiential work for brands, taking a brand and thinking about events. And that was part of it. There's others that talked about communications versus experiences in the marketing world. So like, oh, you have advertising and you have broadcast storytelling and you have websites, and that's experience, user experience. And I thought, this is all over the place. And my time within businesses themselves, like the experience as we talk about, I don't know, whether it's car dealers or digital, they're different. The same objectives sometimes, but they're very different experiences. One is I'm, you know, sitting in my sweatpants shopping for a vehicle. The other one, I'm in a dealership and time is of the essence. And so I've come to really believe the experience word is very hard to operationalize. Having a role that was leader of experience, it is everyone's responsibility in the business, everybody, to deliver good experiences. It's not the one person. It is product teams, it's legal. It's, you know, do you have the right rules in place to deliver? It is pricing. It's the product itself. It is anything, it is marketing, it is the brand. All of those are things. So to have teams, people, et cetera, responsible only for the experience when it's really everyone's responsibility, very hard. So I think being able to talk about brands grow by being experience-centric is great. But when you operationalize it, I think it is absolutely super challenging. So I come to believe there's drivers of experience-based thinking that I think are still valid. It's easier to focus on the drivers, and maybe we start putting conversations are important, and you know, a strategy around the experience is important, but you also need to put it to the side because what we're really looking at is customer-centered growth. And that is my new, like, it's really about how do you look at the same pillars that drive experience, but really are looking towards growth. You want stronger relationships, you want a deeper share, I want happier customers, I want a deeper share of wallet, and I want that so good it's building the business.
Right.
And those drivers, so just to kind of finish the thinking, the drivers of experience that I see today that are really important, that are really drivers of growth and orienting the conversation that way, is true customer centricity. Understanding is a business oriented around meeting the needs, meeting the unmet needs, the things that we were talking about. And that is old. It's been around since Peter Drucker, I think, you know, focus on the customer, but it is still valid. So customer centricity, data, And number two is, do you have the right data analysis and methods by which you can understand your customer? So that is changing rapidly, and deliver on that data. So voice of the customer, et cetera. Design is number three. Design has always differentiated better brands and better experiences from lesser ones. So still valid, and you can measure, again, the outcomes of each of these things. But design is a very tangible thing that people within a company understand the value of design. You have a new product, you have a new mobile app, et cetera. Number four is products. What is interesting today is kind of everything's become a product. Every aspect of the customer experience, and a lot of our best customer focused people are actually now in product roles. They're intended to understand who is the target customer for their product, and whether their product is a subscription, is a physical product, or is the customer account feature. And there's a product manager that's in charge of the roadmap. Everything's a product, but those product teams are intended to be very customer focused overall. That's number four. And the last one is customer care, which is probably the least sexy out of all of them, and it is wonderful and fabulous. If you look at, I'll just give you a statistic that's been out for a little while, but customers who encounter a problem and have it resolved successfully, which is quickly and easily, are 50% more loyal than the customers who don't have a problem at all. So if you're already working with a brand and have a brand in your life that you like, and you encounter a glitch and need some help, the opportunity for building maybe a fan and resolving that is there. So I always say there's gold to be had, there's money to be made in customer care. It's not just solving the bugs and contact centers. Yeah, it's all of those things, but it is thinking through. I think people expect that things will go wrong in an exchange, in a relationship, but when they do, making sure you have the right care. And that's not a bot that doesn't work, but is the right care in the right place. And maybe it's actually understanding the data that comes from customer care and factoring that back into the product process to avoid it altogether. But those 5 pillars of what I think are important parts of customer experience, I think are better framed around that's a strategy towards customer-centered growth that will continue to grow the business. And I think thinking about customer-centered growth is a more action-oriented, that's clear. It's clear to everybody who understands, like, oh, what do we mean? It means more profit, more dollars, and happier customers also, not in that order. But
great, I think great framed there. And I was just trying to listening to all of that, and I realized I was just trying to see that, you talk about customers, you talk about happy customers, and that comes to a point that emotions play a big role. And historically brands have not been thinking about it, but now brands do think that how do customers feel while interacting with the brand? Not just an Apple store, kind of a feel, that's great. But then, like you said, if let's say my card got stolen and I call customer care, I have to wait for 1 hour, it's frustrating. But if somebody shows up and within 5 minutes are able to solve my problem, block my card, tell me your new card is on the way, it'll reach you tomorrow morning, problem solved. So my memory of this experience is positive. It's not negative as compared to, let's say, it's referring to the same book, David Kahneman, I think he mentioned about that memory of the experience is more important than the experience itself. I may be going out, dining out with my friends, have a great 1 hour time, but let's say in last 10 minutes, a big gang of kids come in, make a ruckus, do all of that. My memory of that experience turns into a bad experience. So, you'll only remember that. You'll not remember the 1 hour you had spent great time with your friends. So again, connecting back to emotions, so memory of that experience becomes so important. So our brands, in fact, not our brands now need to focus on memory, not memory, but then how do you design experiences which would land positive memories?
I love that, first of all. I love that you're bringing that up. I don't know if it's memories or memorable.
Memorable.
So that's the root, and I think that is understanding where in your customer journey, as any brand is, where are those opportunities for memorable? And I also think you might not want to design forcefully, because that's the thinking fast and slow. A lot of cases, I want banking to be unmemorable. Auto pay, there when I need it. Like I don't need, but when you do need it, which is the care opportunity, make sure it's there. Make sure it's protective.
Secure.
I had my cards stolen. Little anecdote, I won't tell all the details. At the gym, someone took 2 cards out of my wallet, went shopping. While I was at the gym in an hour, one card provider called me, which is how I found out about it. I was leaving the gym and and the other one, so they were looking out for me. So I will remember that because it's a moment that matters. Like, it was a large charge at Van Cleef and Arpels, and I get the text in their call saying someone used your card. Their fraud detection flagged it, and they were there. The second card, once I realized the cards were missing from my wallet, I went onto the mobile app and I just hit block card. And the services were there to prevent it. And then 10 minutes later, I got a message saying, we just denied a charge at Chanel.
Wow.
These are 5-digit charges, both of them, because I turned it off. And in both cases, those were use cases to present. It saves them money. It saves me angst and nervousness around what's going to happen. One was proactively looking out for me. One I caught first and had the ease of just going, and it didn't take long to find, I can shut the card off. And 10 minutes later, I don't think it was 10 minutes. I got the card because I turned it off. So those are great examples of designing a moment that matters and enabling customers in self-service. And I didn't chat. With the second one, I didn't need to do anything. The first one, they caught it, but they called me and new cards were on the way, so to speak. So just understanding that in any relationship, purchase through use, through problem, through risk, to maybe repurchase or upgrading, there will be those times, and making sure you're there for them in the memorable, the moments that matter and kind of thing is super important. And a lot of the other stuff is okay to be on thinking one or not, almost autonomous, and you're building strong relationships in some form or another.
And in continuation to this, do you think that culture of an organization is not talked about much these days? Because if as an organization I'm empowering my end employee last touch employee who's interacting with the customer, if he is empowered to take certain decisions on the fly, understanding the situation and the context, that will land that memorable, positive experience.
Absolutely.
But we don't talk a lot about culture.
I think we talk and then we move on. So turning culture into behaviors, turning culture into policies, that is really important. So years of experience working with many different companies. As I said, there's probably not a company I've encountered that doesn't have customer as part of their purpose and core values. It's what do you do? Are people, are the metrics for tracking great customer relationship used? Are they used maybe for incentives or how people are rewarded? Are you allowing your employees the ability, and Home Depot apparently does that. Ritz-Carlton is famous for it. They allow every associate to resolve a customer. But that shows keeping customers in a good place is part of how they see doing business. And they allow the frontline and all sorts of employees to do all of that. That's a behavior and a process that is. So I think turning the talk, customer, we're going to draw it on our whiteboard, and then we're going to move on to profit and product, which is often how companies operate because they don't know how to operationalize that. That is absolutely key. So I think you've walked right into a topic that I feel very strongly about because I've worked with teams and inside companies where they look at customer centricity and customer experience focus as a cultural change. Oh, we're so glad you're here and your teams are here because we need it. But I think it's also bigger than a person and a team. It's got to be adopted, CEO down, and it's got to be looked at. You've got to really have, and so those models and those changes happen directly CEO down to really put it into action in some form.
But one part I personally don't like in that is when company says that they're customer obsessed without actually defining what it means. I mean, I've seen it in some of the organization as well. They proudly say we are customer obsessed, but without really defining, are you doing good for the customer or where do you draw the boundary? Or, I mean, in the sense, let me give an example. Let's say Costco.
Yep.
You can return anything within 1 year. Let's say, I'm just saying. You're changing customer behavior, which may not be good for business. Probably you're killing other competitors as well, maybe yourself in the long run, maybe. That's not good for the customer in general. I mean, if I've already used a product, why should I go and, return it? I'm not saying everybody does it, but probably 10% of the people do it. Another example, for example, in India, we have this big thing of 10 minutes delivery, groceries, food, everything within 10 minutes. I was like, do I even need it in 10 minutes? No, I can wait it, you know. I have become less efficient. I mean, me and my wife were discussing about this. We used to order groceries for the entire month or 2 months and have it. But now since we know it can come within 10 minutes, we have stopped planning because we are just reacting. Oh, this is finished, I'll order, it'll come in 10 minutes. We have become less efficient. I personally, I don't feel comfortable as like, we used to be good planners. We're not those planners anymore. So I'm not feeling good about myself. So the brand is customer obsessed, but maybe I don't need that all the time.
Absolutely.
So
Again, I think the time came for that type of thinking, and I think the time is going. Okay. As I start to talk about how I think about the experience versus growth, being smarter about the outcomes that you're trying to achieve for your customers and for your business. So customer obsessed is one of those vague things that there's no real way to measure it, and it creates hero mentalities within companies. Oh, well, we did this, and I was working with another company that talked about extraordinary experiences for customers. What does that mean? So the hero, and then you're not actually talking about what it is that you want to change and for whom. So I'll also say, as part of that, the 5 pillars and data and understanding being truly customer-centric, but who are your most valuable customers?
Right.
I don't want to treat everyone the same way. Sometimes jumping through hoops for an unprofitable customer is not good business. Right. And it also gets in the way of maybe giving service to a very loyal customer. So how do you think through? So having the right, and I'll also say within customer experience teams, there's such strong empathy for the customer, but saying we don't want to deliver for 10 minutes. It seems almost antithetical, but towards doing what's right. But you might be creating behaviors that aren't right for the customer, aren't right for the business,
right.
and don't. So having a really clear idea and understanding that not all customers are equal.
Right.
And it feels like a hard truth to maybe some teams, but it also makes total business sense. So what do you want to do and why, and having the best outcome that is there.
Yeah.
The 10-minute delivery is very interesting. I hadn't heard that, but I can only imagine that sets a bar of expectation for other businesses and other industries, and then also changes a behavior that is, I love that you point out, it's really not necessary.
Yeah.
Might be necessary for some things. How great would it be for those emergency things, but other stuff comes, and how do you stratify that? And it's probably not also great for the delivery people.
It is not. That's what.
It's dangerous.
It's not safe to drive on the road.
Totally,
Yeah.
and that's not great for the pedestrians and others that get There's a whole run-on an effect that isn't maybe good for society that is just created from this instantaneous, and we think we're going to differentiate.
Yeah.
Super interesting, but again, I'll go back to that. Customer obsessed, extraordinary. These words, experiences. Not only is it hard to talk about what do you mean by experience, what do you mean by extraordinary?
Yeah.
And then customer and obsessed, and who is your target, and just being obsessed isn't really good business.
Interesting point. Who's your customer? Because I was talking to a professor in one of my podcasts, and he said, my customer is my student. So if I say I have to make my student happy, no, that's not my goal. Mm-hmm. It's like if I don't give them any homework, they'll be super happy. If I tell them the class is not happening, they'll probably be super happy. And if I give them 10 on 10 on grades without them doing, they'll be super happy. But that's not what my focus is.
His job to be done is not happiness.
Is not happiness.
His
so
job
for
to be
every
done
customer, it's
is
not
for imparting knowledge and maybe imparting the desire for more, whatever it might be.
Yeah, exactly.
But you have to be, and those are other mechanisms that have clear and better outcomes for, I think actually product teams are jobs to be done people.
Right.
They should be relentlessly focused on the job to be done in that product, not on differentiation, et cetera, because that will always lead you towards. But if he's thinking properly around kind of what his job to be done is, it's not happiness. I also think delight. It goes back to where business was, what we've talked about. So experiences, loaded word, maybe not all that helpful. Delight. Oh, we want to delight our customers. Do you? Always? I mean, not a bad thing, but that's very hard to operationalize delight. I would see kind of a mission and core value of delighting, being upset, customer obsessed in order to delight customers. To actually, that would encourage a 10-minute delivery window.
Right.
But in the long run, it's not actually. So being really clear and stripping away this language that sounds good, but is not helpful and is not, again, I'll go back to
Not needed, maybe,
operationalizing it. What do you mean and what are the metrics and what are the behaviors? And it's not those two things.
Right. And then probably coming to the last section,
Mm-hmm.
since there's so many different aspects, and in large organizations, you have marketing, you
Mhm.
have operations, you have tech, you have finance, all different functions focusing towards designing that CX, everything that we talked about. But who owns CX? Because typically they would go for the local maxima. Somebody looking at marketing would focus on getting more signups, so they'll focus on that. But are they getting the right customers? Maybe they don't care because their KPI is getting more signups. From a product team standpoint, would be new features. How many features have they rolled out? Were the features great? Not great? Quality of the features? Did they solve the problem? If that's not the KPI, again, overall as a company, they're going to falter. And likewise. So who owns CX then?
So I don't know if this is our last chapter, but this is such a brilliant topic because I think everyone owns CX. Having had roles where I was a lead for CX in an org, but everybody owns it. It goes back to like marketing is part of the experience. But I think marketing's real role is growth. You need to think about brand and product and growth and how to actually, it's not just sales, but just growth. Everyone owns customer-focused thinking. If you're not thinking that, you probably shouldn't be in that organization. So, but I'll go back to when it comes to the experience part of CX, everyone has such a big part, it's hard to put it. It's not just part of marketing, it's oftentimes related to marketing, but it's also part of product, it's also part of the tech. It delivers on
It's
the
like a movie,
experience.
right? It's like everything has to fall in place for
Absolutely.
a great movie. Yeah.
Which is why I think maybe the time has come to talk about it, but not actually own it in some form. Now, I do think a lot of customer experience CX related functions now fit within product teams. So I think as I look at where things, and I think, care is important and brand and design, but if I look at more maybe recently reorganized companies and modern, the product teams are like little mini businesses.
Right.
Product lead needs to be relentlessly customer focused on how is she or he meeting the needs of a customer. What is the job to be done? Product teams oftentimes now are looking at analytics. They're oftentimes looking at hopefully design. Design teams are fully incorporated. They should also be accountable for care. I do think customer care should be attributed back to the product teams, et cetera. Like how many calls are coming? Because that'll make them fix those problems and things. So I think CX ownership needs to be philosophical and strategic, but maybe not as much organizational.
Okay.
The growth-oriented, the data, all those other things are more actionable. They can be owned in service of customer growth and customer experience.
But it's not about the accountability. So everybody's accountable, probably they're doing the right thing. But like in a movie example, right? Everybody is accountable, right? From actors to dancers or musicians, but it's the director who's accountable for getting everything together in one frame, the story that the scriptwriter wrote to land that story. But that director holds that accountability. I mean, we have seen so many times that probably some of the movies where the script is exactly the same. Maybe it's based on historical events, same story, same script, but one movie is great, the other one is not that great because the direction. Not the actors, probably it's the direction. So who's that director? Because he owns that. So who owns that CX? Because otherwise, how do we build that synergy? So do brands need a CX coach or a CXO? Because I read that you were the first CXO for MasterCard. So how did that change? I mean, and that's a change I'm seeing. I'm hoping is coming. Would that CXO now take the baton and decide how to orchestrate the CX and how to pull everybody together?
So you could say that, but unless you had products reporting to CXO, unless you had some level of tech, even marketing, it's hard to have that job and not be so empowered. So I think what we need are business leaders, CEOs, that are fully bought off on customer-centered growth, fully bought off on the fact that the experience is relentlessly and is fundamentally important. Then they can impart, and so where I'm going with this is I kind of think it's a CEO's job to be that director. And we need the right level of leadership to impart to product teams, to care teams, to brand, to marketing teams, that the experience is really important, but let them have the outcomes that all support customer-centered growth. And then the business will differentiate. It's how Amazon was built. It's Bezos' thinking that he took right from the get-go and took it to a certain point. Like it or not, and whatever, we sometimes don't, criticize him, but that's who Bezos was. That's how Amazon grew. It's oftentimes how some of the other brands that we call out have really greatly differentiated. But once you put it into, and now it's not to say they don't need coaches and change agents. So I think a lot of brands need that. But once you try to put the experience lives here, and the experience lives within this person, and then they're in charge of things that they maybe can't always fix. They're just the change agent. And then it means the others aren't responsible for the experience. I've come to believe, being the first CXO in 2 different companies, but also leaving those companies and having them not replace the role says something. And maybe it says something about me, but it says something more around maybe the role was needed for a time and a place, and those companies got to a certain point. So I think we are still in the midst of a fantastic transformation that is customer first, that is experience centric, really important. How do we get there will change. So companies might need that coach. They might need that role for a time being, but it needs to be imparted. You need to have the right data, analytics, customer centricity bought off. So it's a little bit of, but again, my time in a couple different places and how I've thought about how those places change and evolved and what's next for them has led me maybe to a different way of thinking, which is why I kind of talk about writing a book around customer-centered growth to talk about the changes that I've seen.
So everything, if all the business functions align to that, let's say, a business growth metric.
Yes.
And build that mapping to whatever metrics they have respectively to that business growth metric, and then probably that synergy hopefully would fall into place.
Absolutely. And it's not easy to get there, but companies kind of are doing it, and that's where I see the role of coaches, of external partners to push the change within, because companies are constantly evolving. There's no you're there. There's also what's next, and with the next set of evolution that we're seeing, the disruption that's happening is how to capitalize on it. But how to really focus on the right outcomes. And I love that in this conversation we've talked about obsession, extraordinary. Those aren't those outcomes, 10-minute delivery. Those aren't really, those might do their vanity metrics that might help for a short
Great
time,
PR moment,
but they're not actually furthering the business for the longer term.
So maybe the next generation of CEOs would come from UX, CX background, maybe.
It would be fantastic to see that.
Fantastic to see, yeah.
I mean, I think even looking at how product folks have become CEOs, and if you can change product-based thinking, that is the way to that path. But I look,
But because we're seeing new roles, even a chief marketing technical officer, CMTO, that's a new role,
Exactly, and I've seen, the MasterCard, the CEO today was the chief product officer. And the chief product officer was thinking very much around customer, consumer, and what are those different ways. So that's the path. I'm not sure UX folks or CX folks are necessarily the next CEOs, but the change that's happening within those waves is pretty brilliant. So.
Cool. Thank you so much.
This was delightful.
I love the conversation. Thank you for doing this podcast, for doing this and sharing all the experiences. Thank you.
So good seeing you.
Likewise.
I love the questions and I love this conversation. It's been really terrific.
Thank you so much, and thanks for watching the episode, and keep watching. Do subscribe to the channel to watch more episodes. Thank you.